Okay, Eric, so to summarize, the main issue is determining how to cover the required material in a certain amount of time.
Yeah, the only thing I would really add is, as far as timing goes, is I want to make sure I have time for special projects.
That's a good point, and I certainly think we have some options here. Now, what might you imagine as a possible solution?
Well, one big issue, again, is time and content. I'm starting to realize that I just can't use the textbook as my lesson planner. We talked earlier, there are other resources out there I need to look at, like our district curriculum.
That's a great observation. You really do need to be a planner first before you can become the teacher.
Yeah, I remember my first week, I started chapter 1, really didn't take time into any consideration, just figured we'd see how long this takes, and it took way too long. If I did that for every chapter, I'm definitely running out of time at the end of the year.
That's a good point and great observation, but remember that end of the year is only one target. You want to have a place in mind where you want your classes to be by the end of the first quarter, first semester, or third quarter.
Yeah, and I really need to work on the plan for the year, and the resources we talked about will definitely help me with that.
Okay, now speaking of those resources, we've got the district curriculum, the pacing guide in your teacher textbook, and I think those are going to be a part of our solution here. What I want you to do is keep those in mind and a couple other items when you're planning your next unit. So when you plan your next unit, here are 3 things I really want you thinking about. What are your must-covers? What are those items in each unit or lesson that you absolutely have to cover, that your students have to know so you can get into that next unit? Secondly, what instructional and assessment strategies are you going to use? And keeping track of those as you plan your unit and lessons, that's a great way of seeing, am I using one strategy too much? Am I not using another strategy at all? And finally, I think the main issue we're talking about here is try and set a timetable for each lesson or unit as you plan it.
Okay, so those must-covers, that's that 10 to 12 things we talked about earlier that I really want my students to make sure they get out of the chapter?
Absolutely, those are things they have to know before you can move on. Now, for our next step, let's think about your next unit and how you're going to plan for that.
Okay, I like the unit plan, but I really want to start with just one chapter, kind of do it as a test run, make sure I got it right.
That's a great idea. So for our next steps, for your next step, why don't you look at the next chapter you're going to cover, consult the pacing guide, the district curriculum, and plan out that next chapter.
Okay, that sounds good.
And if it's okay with you, I think for my next step, I'm going to do the same thing. I'll plan out that next chapter you're going to cover, and then our next meeting we can come together and kind of compare.
Hey, you know what? I like that. It really gives me the ability to judge on whether or not we're really on the same page and I'm taking my classes where I really think they want to go.
Outstanding. So let's plan on that for our next meeting, same time, same place next week.
Perfect.
Outstanding.